In this exercise, I'm going to demonstrate a bunch of hidden tips and tricks associated with the width tool here inside of Illustrator CS5. I've gone ahead and saved my progress as variablewidthstrokes.ai found inside the usual 07 fill stroke folder. And let's say that the goal that I'm ultimately working toward is to take the variable width stroke that I've applied to this big black looping path in the background. And I want to be able to apply it to either open or closed paths alike. And that's a very important distinction because what it means is that you need to make sure that your endpoints have exactly the same stroke weight. So this endpoint here needs to exactly match this endpoint over there. Why is that so important? Well, let me go ahead and show you. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, or press the L key, of course, and I'll draw, let's say, a circle. So I'm pressing the Shift key as I draw this shape, just so that we have a nice symmetrical shape to work with here. And I'll switch to a very thick stroke, let's say 60 points thick. And let's go ahead and make it a bright green by changing the magenta value to 0. I'll change the yellow value to 100, and I'll change the black value to 0 as well. The cyan value was already 50%, which is what I want. And the reason I'm going for such a garish color is not for any aesthetic reasons. I want you to be able to easily make out this stroke. All right, now I'll go up to the Variable Width Profile pop-up menu. I'll click on it, and I'm going to scroll down to one of the asymmetrical profiles, like this guy right there. Notice that it begins very thick and ends very thin, which is great for an open path, but it's not going to work well for a closed path. So if I click on it, notice what happens. We have a very thick line weight over here on the right-hand side of the path, and it gets progressively thinner as we wind our way clockwise around that circle until all of a sudden it pretty much disappears right at this point, and then it suddenly grows thicker. So that's a real problem where closed paths are concerned. If you don't want that sudden shift, and believe me, it looks even worse if it's just slightly off, then you have to make sure that the beginning point and the end point are exactly the same. All right, so how in the world do you do that when you don't get any feedback when you're using that width tool? Well, I'll show you. I'll go ahead and press the backspace key or the delete key to get rid of that circle. I'm going to switch over to my width tool, and I'll hover over one of these endpoints associated with this path. Now notice again, the path is not selected, and by the by, if you're having problems increasing or decreasing the width of strokes that you don't mean to inside of an illustration, then lock down the strokes that you don't want to modify. That's your best bet. But anyway, in our case, our strokes are pretty far apart from each other. I'm going to go down to this location right there, this first endpoint. And notice if you start dragging these handles, you don't get any feedback whatsoever inside the stroke panel. You don't see anything up here in the control panel. In fact, it's not even showing us the proper stroke color at this point in time because the path's not selected. We don't see anything inside the info panel. So it's just one disappointment after another in terms of trying to gauge what this line weight is. Well, there is a secret hidden function here, and that is, let me go ahead and make this guy a little thinner, and I'll double click on this width point, and up comes the width point edit dialog box. This guy allows you to assign a very specific total width setting. Now by total width, it means the total width of this one and only one point. And the reason it's total is because it's side 1 plus side 2. So in other words, the stroke can drift more in one direction than the other. For example, watch this. I'll go ahead and change side 2 to something ridiculous. Let's say 100 points like that, and I'll press the tab key. And notice, even though we don't have a preview checkbox, we can preview our modifications out here in the illustration window automatically, and that goes ahead and sends that one side way off away from the path outline. So you can create those sorts of asymmetrical width points if you want to. And you can even do it directly inside the illustration window. I'll show you how that works in just a moment. But for now, I'm going to lock these two in alignment with each other, and I'm going to change that total width value to 10, and then press the tab key like so. And then notice that the relative sizes of side 1 and side 2 are locked down. All right, that's not really what I want, so I'm going to unlock, and I'm going to change the side 1 value to 5 and the side 2 value to 5 as well. And now they'll go ahead and change together. As you see, if I change this value to 20, then they both change to 10 points apiece. What's up with this checkbox? What it does, it allows you to edit all of the width values together proportionally. So in other words, I'll go ahead and turn that option on, and I'll change this width value to say, again, something really high, like 60 points. And notice that all of the width points grow in kind. If I then reduce that value to something like 6 points and press tab, they all decline in kind as well. It's not what I want, so I'll turn off this checkbox. I'm going to change that total width value to 10 points. I'm going to make sure it's symmetrical, 5 and 5, and then I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this guy. I'll double click on him. Brings up the width point edit dialog box. I'll change this value to 10. That will automatically change the other two values to 5 and 5, and then I'll click OK. But before I do, I want you to see there is a delete button. It's dimmed right now because we're working on an endpoint, but you can delete any of the other width points as long as they're not located at the endpoints of the path. All right, I'll go ahead and click OK. All right, now that I've managed to make the line weight identical at each of the endpoints, I want to show you a couple of other things you can do. I'm going to switch over to this point right there along the path outline. So notice it's not located at an endpoint. After I've selected it, I can press backspace or delete on the Mac to delete that point. So that's one thing you can do. I'll go ahead and press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that deletion. Another thing you can do is you can move these two handles independently of each other. So by default, as you drag them around, they both move symmetrically about that width point. However, if you press and hold the Alt key or the Option key on a Mac, you can move one point independently of the other one. Now, this affects Illustrator's behavior in a very interesting way. I'm going to go back up here to the black arrow tool and click on it to make it active. Then I'll click on the red arrow in order to select it. And I want you to see something here. If I bring up the stroke panel, notice that we have this custom profile right there. I'll go ahead and hover over it, and it's saying custom because I set up these width points myself in the previous exercise. Notice next to the profile option, you have flip along, but flip across is dimmed. Well, flip along, we'll go ahead and flip the line weight the other direction. Check that out so that it starts thick and ends thin like so. I want to show you this. This is really great. Then if you wanted to, you could go back to your width tool, and I could find that width point that got flipped to the other location. And notice it's not all the way to the end point. It's about midway here, and I could move it to a different location. And I'm going to go ahead and make it thicker like so. And now watch, I can drag that width point, and I can see the change happen on the fly like I'm working on some kind of crazy tapeworm here. And that gives me all the feedback I need to figure out exactly what I'm doing. So you could say, for example, you know what? I don't want this point. I'm going to go ahead and backspace it to get rid of it. I've got a point at the beginning up here, and I've got a point at the end, and I'm going to make that end point much thicker like so. And then I'll go back to the stroke option and I'll flip it again to put it underneath the arrow if I want to. So in other words, you have all kinds of control over exactly how these variable width strokes are going to look. But why is this option dimmed? Well, because at every point along this path outline, those two handles right there are symmetrical about the width points because we didn't alter option drag any of those handles. Whereas, check this out, if I switch back to my selection tool once again, click on the black path outline in the background, which is asymmetrical, then I'll bring up my stroke panel, and now notice I can not only switch back and forth, so I can flip the stroke along the path, but I can also flip it across the path like so. So that is a function of Alt or Option dragging those handles. Now then, if at any point you decide, you know what, you do want to keep things symmetrical, then just go back here to the width tool, find that point along the path outline, it should be right there, double click on it, and then make sure to set both of these side values to the same thing. So I'm going to set the first size value to 20, let's say, and the second size value to 20 as well. Check out how it looks. Even if it's not exactly right, what you know is that both sides are symmetrical. You can click OK, and now you can drag those handles exactly where you want them. In the next exercise, I'm going to save out my settings as a variable width profile and apply them to a different illustration.